All right, so it's the first Friday of 2020. We're starting a new decade, and it is time for the weekly power rankings. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe as we get into the first power rankings of the new decade. All right, so we're going to change things up for the new year, the new decade, as instead of taking a look at the Metro to start off, we're going to take a look in the Western Conference at the Central Division. So to start things off, at number 7 in the West, in the Central, is the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild are 19, 17, and 5 on the season. They only won one of their games this week, unfortunately. A win, a pretty big one actually, down in Denver, beating the Colorado Avalanche 6-4. They would lose to the Islanders and the Toronto Maple Leafs at home to finish off the new year. Unfortunately, not the results the Wild were hoping for. They find themselves back at the bottom here after this week. Not such a great end to 2019, and going now into 2020, find themselves back at the bottom of the Central. But there is hope for the Minnesota Wild. They still find themselves in a pretty decent spot. That division is pretty wide open. The gap between them and the Winnipeg Jets right now in a wild card spot, it's really been closing up. The Dallas Stars, Nashville, even Chicago is, as weak as they've been. We'll talk about them in a minute, but they've been playing some pretty good hockey here to start off the new year. So, this is a Minnesota team. They still find themselves in the chase. Maybe a trade or two here or there. Minnesota Wild could find themselves possibly in a playoff spot. So the Wild obviously having some struggles. I would like to see Kaapo Kähkönen come back up for the Minnesota Wild. He played really well with the Wild. I would have to think a trade would have to go down between Stalock and Dubnyk. Obviously, I think Dubnyk would be the guy they'd want to keep, and Stalock possibly being the guy on his way out. But that's something that Minnesota Wild, maybe, we know that goaltenders take a little bit longer to develop, and the Wild are taking their time with Kähkönen, so that might be the right choice long term. So I have a feeling that's why he's been in the American League this year. All right, so that means at number 6, moving up this week at number 6, is the Chicago Blackhawks. So the Blackhawks take themselves out of the bottom of the basement to start off 2020. Their record is 18, 18, and 6 on the season. They won 3 of their 4 games this week, and Robin Lehner has looked very good for the Chicago Blackhawks. He played very well in a couple of these games. The game after Christmas, he was actually having a little bit of banter around the holidays, telling the Islanders not to eat too much during the holiday break because they were going to have, be going up against Lehner in that game on Friday night in the UC, and the Blackhawks were able to pull off that victory, pretty much beating up on the Islanders. The Islanders started off the game early, getting a goal by Ross Johnson, but it was pretty much Blackhawks the rest of the way. They would win that one 5-2. They had a very controversial game against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Some time was ticking off the clock and wasn't reset by the officials or the video crew, and unfortunately it led to pretty much the end of overtime when Zach Werenski probably should have had a goal there. Blackhawks get away with one. They win the game in a shootout. Lehner was sensational in that shootout. They were able to pick up the victory, and it's good for the Blackhawks. They seem to be getting a little bit of luck on their side, a couple of bounces going their way, and they find themselves with a pretty solid week. They start a Western Canadian road trip, beating the Calgary Flames. Unfortunately, losing to the Vancouver Canucks didn't really help that, but they are playing very solid right now in Chicago. All right, so that means at number 5 in this week's Power Rankings, and this changed a lot because of the Winter Classic game on January 1st. The Nashville Predators find themselves at number 5 this week, 18, 15, and 6 on the season. They lost all 3 of their games this past week. Unfortunately, they lost to the Pittsburgh Penguins to start things off, a home-and-home with the Penguins. They would not get revenge back in Pittsburgh. They would lose 6-4 in Pittsburgh. Then they would play Dallas in the Winter Classic in the Cotton Bowl, and they lost that one after going up early 2-0 on a couple of penalties by the Dallas Stars. They would end up losing, giving up 4 consecutive goals, and they would lose to the Dallas Stars in the 2020 Winter Classic. But nonetheless, the Nashville Predators find themselves, again, there's a very wide open division. And, we were just talking about the Minnesota Wild still being in the hunt at the very least. Definitely the Nashville Predators as well. And it's definitely concerning right now. Looking at the Predators, we pretty much projected them to pretty much be a for sure playoff team this season, but definitely things have changed a little bit in that division. Definitely a little bit of a changing of the guard, and we've seen that. But it's only been a matter of time. Really, the only difference here is that Colorado is just where they're supposed to be, and if not one of the best teams in the Western Conference. That's unfortunately Nashville's kind of the odd man out right now. They got to find their way out of this situation, but they definitely have the talent up front and on the back end to do so. Dante Fabro has looked very good for the Nashville Predators. That's a good sign. The only bad thing that really with Nashville that's concerning to me is the goaltending situation. Pekka Rinne has been on and off, as well as UC Saros. I don't think Saros has completely solidified that position as a starting goaltender. Maybe they need to bring someone in. Maybe Pekka Rinne stays, but there's going to be some interesting conversations over the summer with the Nashville Predators and their goaltending. So that means moving up this week in the power rankings in the Central at number 4 is the Cotton Bowl winners. Did they win the Cotton Bowl? No, that was Penn State. But the Dallas Stars are at number 4 in this week's power rankings. 22, 15, and 4 on the season. They won all 3 of their games this week. They beat the Colorado Avalanche 3-2 in a shootout. They go down to Arizona and beat the Arizona Coyotes 4-2. Then they play the Nashville Predators in the Cotton Bowl down 2 goals. They score 4 consecutive goals unanswered and win the Cotton Bowl 4-2. A very good game there in Dallas. It does show that there is fans in Dallas that watch hockey. Dallas is definitely a hockey town, considering they had, I believe, the 3rd most in attendance in an NHL game ever. So congratulations there. That's a cool thing. You see the little pigs racing and things like that. It was very odd, if I'm going to be honest with you, but it was very cool to see that. And I think it's a good thing for the game to see the growth of the game down in the South, and the ice seemed to hold up pretty well. It's been in northern cities where it hasn't done nearly as well. I think the NHL did a very good job. The crews did a very good job of handling the ice, and I think they're becoming, they're becoming pros at this thing at this point. So, great job by the crew and a great game, a great atmosphere overall. I got to get myself down to one of these Winter Classics, but I think this one would have been a year to go because, man, it looked really good. All right, so at number 3, and they had their outdoor classic game earlier last season in the fall. Number 3 is the Winnipeg Jets. So the Winnipeg Jets are 22, 16, and 3 on the season. They picked up points in only 2 of their games. They only won 1 game this week, unfortunately. They lost to St. Louis Blues in overtime, and then they had a home-and-home with the Blues where they lost on the road in St. Louis 4-1. They were able to put up a good number on the Colorado Avalanche. They won 7-4, but last night against the Toronto Maple Leafs, seemed like a home crowd for the Maple Leafs. It was a very loud building there in favor of the Toronto Maple Leafs. A lot of "Go Leaf, Go" chants during the game, and the Winnipeg Jets lost that one 6-3, just unable to outscore the Toronto Maple Leafs. Laurent Brossoit didn't look great in the beginning of that game. That was definitely a bit of an issue for the Winnipeg Jets, but they found a way. They kept it a pretty close game. Just weren't able to get things done. Pretty tough week for the Winnipeg Jets. If they don't move up, they could easily see themselves moving down in these rankings. I had them up at number 2 not that long ago, and they've really kind of relinquished that since then. All right, so that means at number 2, actually moving down a spot in this week's power rankings in the Central Division, is the Colorado Avalanche. So the Avalanche find themselves 24, 13, and 4 on the season. They won only 1 of their 5 games this week, so a disappointing week for the Colorado Avalanche. They lost to the Minnesota Wild. They lost in a shootout to the Dallas Stars. A home-and-home with the Dallas Stars. They would play the Dallas Stars again at home. They would lose 4-2 in that one. They would play the Winnipeg Jets, lose that one to the Winnipeg Jets, and they did pick up a win against the St. Louis Blues to end off the week, a 7-3 victory last night. A good sign of things to come for the Colorado Avalanche. It was a pretty loud crowd there in the Pepsi Center last night, and the Colorado Avalanche find a way to get themselves out of a little bit of a hole they've started to dig themselves into, losing to a couple of divisional opponents this past week. St. Louis, Minnesota, Dallas. Winnipeg, and St. Louis. So that's definitely, those are all teams in your division. You got to pick up points when you can, especially, considering where they are. As long as you pick up, overtime points and pick up wins maybe you didn't deserve, it's not too bad. But teams are definitely starting to catch up to the Colorado Avalanche. So that means that number 1 in this week's power rankings in the Central Division, it's been a matter of time, but the St. Louis Blues find themselves back at the top of the Central Division this week. They're 26, 10, and 6 on the season. They split their 4 games this week, winning 2 and losing 2. They did beat the Winnipeg Jets 5-4 in a crazy overtime winner. They beat the Winnipeg Jets again in that home-and-home, a 4-1 victory there. They lose to the Arizona Coyotes down in Arizona, a 3-1 loss, and then they lose to the Colorado Avalanche 7-3 last night in Colorado. So just a quick recap. At number 7 is the Minnesota Wild. At number 6, moving up a spot, is the Chicago Blackhawks. At number 5 is the Nashville Predators. Number 4, the Dallas Stars. Number 3 is the Winnipeg Jets. Moving down a spot this week, at number 2 is the Colorado Avalanche. And moving up back to the top spot, it's been a couple of weeks. They missed it. They're back here this week. At number 1 is the St. Louis Blues. So with that, let's take a look at the Pacific in the Western Conference. All right, so taking a look at the Pacific Division as we continue the Western Conference here. At number 8 is the Anaheim Ducks once again. The Ducks are 16, 20, and 5 on the season. They won only 1 of their 4 games this week. Another disappointing week for the Anaheim Ducks. Really frustrating to watch this team. John Gibson has looked very good, and people have been asking me about, what should the Ducks do with this team? What has to happen with the Ducks? What has to happen? Do they rebuild? Do they try and go for it? It's a disappointing year right now, and I think the easy thing to say is just trade everybody off, but you really don't want to do that either because it really sets you back a couple of years. I really like this defensive core. They've kind of, taken pieces out of that over the last little while, trading Brandon Montour to Buffalo. They're trading guys out recently since Kevin Bieksa left. Certain guys like that. I mean, obviously Bieksa isn't a huge player on the defense, but those little changes, it started to add up for the Anaheim Ducks. Their offense isn't where it used to be. Corey Perry, obviously no longer here, and Getzlaf, he's played decent. This past week I'll give Getzlaf credit. He has played pretty well this past week for the Anaheim Ducks, but you look at some of these restricted free agents and unrestricted free agents, and I'm probably going to make a video about that, but the Anaheim Ducks have some guys that they got to figure out what they're going to do. Kasha is a restricted free agent. Do they want to keep Kasha? There were rumors he was going to get traded in the summer last year, so maybe they try and get things done. Maybe they aren't totally sold on Kasha at this point. He's been playing the penalty kill and the power play, so he definitely logs a lot of minutes for the Anaheim Ducks. So you wonder what they feel about him. And the Anaheim Ducks, I mean, if not for John Gibson, I don't think the Anaheim Ducks have a crying chance at this point. They probably find themselves in a spot really where the Detroit Red Wings find themselves right now. Had Detroit had a little bit better goaltending, they might be where the Anaheim Ducks are. So without Gibson, this Anaheim team, really frustrating to watch. There's some really promising things about this Ducks team as well, though. You have Isaac Lundestrom, Sam Steele, Maxime Comtois. You have some really promising guys on this team. They just need to put it together. They need to continue to grow. And they have some really good centers as well. One of the, maybe not so much now because Getzlaf has definitely fallen off. But Getzlaf, Henrique, Devin Shore. I mean, that's a pretty solid, center core there in Anaheim. Ricard Raquel as well. He plays a lot on the wing, but he can play center. So the Anaheim Ducks definitely have some very good talent. I've talked about them way too long here, but that's where they sit this week at number 8. All right, so at number 7 in the Pacific this week is the San Jose Sharks. So the Sharks are 18, 21, and 3 on the season. They won 2 of their 4 games this week. They did pick up an overtime point, though, so they picked up points in 3 of their 4 games this week. San Jose Sharks are continuing to struggle right now. I was tempted to move them up this week, but I don't know. I'm not sold on them right now. The goaltending is a little bit of a mess. If I'm going to be completely honest, this team really is not what they were over the past couple of years, and it's very disappointing. They don't have their first-round pick, which that could really come back to bite them in the butt if Ottawa ends up getting a not only a lottery pick from San Jose, but possibly a top 5 or top 10 pick there from the San Jose Sharks. So definitely disappointing season right now for the Sharks. All right, so at number 6, staying at number 6, look at this. All the California teams are at the bottom in the Pacific this week. Once again, is the Los Angeles Kings. So the Kings are 11, 21, and 4 on the season. They won 2 of their 3 games this week. They did beat the San Jose Sharks 3-2, an overtime victory, a comeback victory. They were down 2-1 late. They ended up getting a goal to tie things up, got things to overtime. Jeff Carter getting the overtime winner in that one. So a big win there get some bragging rights in the state. Definitely nice there for the Los Angeles Kings. They would unfortunately lose in a trip up to Vancouver. They would lose 3-2 up in Vancouver. And then they would play the Philadelphia Flyers at home, a 5-3 victory there. A pretty crazy game, very back and forth, and the Kings found a way to get the victory in that one. All right, so at number 5 in this week's Power Rankings in the Pacific is the Calgary Flames. So the Flames are 21, 17, and 5 on the season. They went 2-2 this week. They beat their crosstown rivals, Alberta rivalry, the Edmonton Oilers 5-1 in Edmonton. They would play the Vancouver Canucks, lose that one 5-2, unfortunately. They would lose to the Chicago Blackhawks as well, 5-3. Then they beat the New York Rangers last night in a close game, a 4-3 victory over the Rangers. So the Calgary Flames have definitely had their fair share of issues here this season. The goaltending's been a little bit shaky. We've seen both goaltenders being pulled back and forth. Definitely some issues with the Calgary Flames. Hopefully they can continue to make themselves a playoff team. This is one of the weaker divisions right now, so they definitely have a legitimate chance at making the playoffs as long as they play good enough. And right now they find themselves they find themselves in a playoff spot one day, out another day. That's definitely a little bit annoying as a fan, but it's still early. As long as you're in a spot where you can make the playoffs, considering how wacky of a first half of a season this has been for the Calgary Flames, it's definitely a good sign, that the second half, as long as it's as good, if not better than the first half, they should be just fine. All right, so the other Alberta team, actually now British Columbia, the BC team, the Vancouver Canucks are number 4 in the Pacific this week, 21, 16, and 4 on the season, 1 game above 500. They won 2 of their 3 games this week. They beat the Los Angeles Kings 3-2, a division rival matchup there. They win that one. They lose to Calgary 5-2, so disappointing effort there. Actually, no, they won that game 5-2. They won 5-2 in Calgary, and then they would play the Chicago Blackhawks, a 7-5 win over the Blackhawks. So they've been giving up goals here and there, which has been a little bit of an issue for the Canucks, but they're playing fairly well. And Elias Pettersson has been on a tear, as he always is. Jacob Markstrom definitely a little bit of a slower progression this week. He really struggled a little bit, but overall the team is finding ways to win. And at the end of the day, to keep Travis Green and Jim Benning off the hot seat, it's very important that they get into the playoffs this year, as we talked about in the video that I should have in the comment in the description down below. So check that out, where we talk about the Canucks and where they sit right now. But right now I have to say the Canucks, since that video, actually look pretty solid. So hopefully they continue that run, and they have the core pieces. They just need to get into the playoffs. All right, so at number 3, staying at number 3 this week, is the Edmonton Oilers. So the Oilers are 21, 17, and 5 on the season. They won 1 of their 3 games this week. Definitely a weird turn of events for the Edmonton Oilers. They started off the season so hot, one of the best teams in the NHL. Things have completely fallen apart in the hands of the Oilers right now. It kind of reminds me of in the Avengers movie where Thanos everybody just starts disappearing, turning to dust. That's kind of what the Oilers look like right now. I don't know what to say happened. They just fell off. Leon Draisaitl said, I've been pretty explicit lately. He really doesn't like how he's been playing. And he's definitely, his plus minus numbers have been awful. Connor McDavid's really haven't been that great either. So the Edmonton Oilers are struggling, and those guys, and I saw an interview the other day, Dave Tippett said it perfectly. He said these guys, they're kind of falling off of the structure because they're down in these games and they want to come back, But unfortunately, they are so focused on scoring goals, which is right. That's the human concept. If you're not scoring goals and you're losing, you need goals, but you need to focus on the system that the coach has. You have to believe in that. And right now, the Oilers are having a hard time with that right now. And once Draisaitl or McDavid gives up that puck, let's be honest, who's really going to stop that? I mean, you do have Oscar Klefbom, Darnell Nurse, but with the goaltending the way it is right now, any odd man rush, it's not going to be a good situation for the Oilers. All right, so moving down, their spot up at number 1 has been relinquished. At number 2 this week is the Arizona Coyotes. The Coyotes are 23, 15, and 4 on the season. They won 2 of their 3 games this week. They did lose to the Vegas Golden Knights, and that was a huge determining factor for this week in terms of who would be in that top spot. They did lose that one in Vegas. They would beat the St. Louis Blues, though, 3-1, a big victory at home there, and then they would beat the Anaheim Ducks 4-2 at home last night, a big victory there in a divisional matchup with the Ducks. The Arizona Coyotes have looked very good. They've definitely had some injuries that have started to plague them a little bit. Taylor Hall is starting to get going with the Coyotes. Very good sign of things to come with this Coyotes team, and let's just see how this lands the rest of the way out. Everybody's, a lot of people are doubting the Arizona Coyotes, and I think there's a little bit of hype on this Coyotes team, and I'm definitely buying into it. I'm buying into the hype train. I really want to see the Coyotes get back to the playoffs. I think, Arizona needs that team in the playoffs desperately, and I think it would be good for the game for the Coyotes to get in. But unfortunately, that means with the Coyotes at number 2 this week, there's only one team left in that division at number 1 after beating the Arizona Coyotes. Like I've said, a huge factor in this week's power rankings. At number 1 is the Vegas Golden Knights. So the Golden Knights are 23, 16, and 5 on the season. They won 3 of their 4 games in the past week. They lost the Anaheim Ducks in Anaheim 4-3. That game was a lot closer than it looked. Nate Schmidt scored 2 goals in the final 2.5 minutes. It was really a 4-2, 4-1 game most of the way through. And really 3-1, 4-1, and they scored a couple late, but it was already over by that point. They would play the Arizona Coyotes. That was huge. They beat the Coyotes at home 4-1. They beat the Anaheim Ducks 5-2 at home, and then they had a very close game, a close call last night against the Philadelphia Flyers, who have been hot recently, struggling on their road trip, but we'll talk about the Flyers in a minute. But the Vegas Golden Knights, a Philadelphia team that's been a little bit hot, and they were up 5-2, 5-1. They felt pretty comfortable. The Flyers definitely made that a game late, but Marc-Andre Fleury and the Vegas Golden Knights found a way to prevail to end off the week on a very solid week, beating the Coyotes, taking the top spot, and playing a very solid Flyers team at the end of the week, finding a way to get a victory. So, quick recap of the Pacific Division. At 8 is the Anaheim Ducks. At number 7, the San Jose Sharks. At number 6, the Los Angeles Kings. At number 5, the Calgary Flames. At number 4 is the Vancouver Canucks. At number 3 is the Edmonton Oilers. Moving down a spot, unfortunately, this week is at 2. The Desert Dogs of Arizona, the Arizona Coyotes at number 2. And then at number 1, back at number 1 after a little bit of an absence for the last couple of weeks, the Vegas Golden Knights are back at the top of the Pacific Division. So with that, we're done with the Western Conference. Let's head to the East. All right, so let's start things off in the Eastern Conference, taking a look at the Atlantic Division. So starting things off, no surprise here, number 32 in the NHL is the Detroit Red Wings. So the Red Wings are 10, 28, and 3 on the season. They are 21 games under 500. Let me say that again. They are 21 games under 500. Yeah, there's going to need to be a couple of beers in Detroit this week and the rest of the season. This is a very disappointing season for the Detroit Red Wings. It continues again this week. They lose 5-4 to the Florida Panthers in a crazy game down in Sunrise. They couldn't find a way to get the victory. They lose 2-1 in a somewhat close game against Tampa, but Tampa Bay didn't really look their best. They kind of knew, we're playing Detroit, kind of get off today, and they still couldn't find a way to beat them. And they play the San Jose Sharks. They did pick up a victory against the Sharks, but I would put the Sharks at 30 or 31 in the entire NHL in their power rankings. So being a San Jose Sharks 2-0 really doesn't mean all that much. really disappointing for the Detroit Red Wings. They need a top 3 draft pick here with Steve Yzerman, and they need a lot of help. They really need a lot of help. It makes you wonder, possibly. I really like Jeff Blashill as a head coach with this team, but you have to wonder, is the message kind of dying there? Is there going to be a possible move there in the managerial role, or in the the bench management? Do they pick up a new head coach? I would think it would be sometime in the offseason. There's no point in getting rid of him during the regular season. This team is what it is. They're not in a win-now situation. There's no need to put in a new head coach, barring some crazy accusations or something like that. Can't put it past the possibility of that. But besides that, it really seems like the Detroit Red Wings are kind of just going to lull their way through the rest of the year. It's very disappointing, considering you look at some of these other teams that we'll talk about, like Ottawa, that really, they knew where they were, but at least they're playing very well. Columbus as well. The Detroit Red Wings really have shown nothing, and that goaltending has been abysmal, and that's a huge reason they are where they are right now. All right, so we've got to speed things along. At number 7 is the Ottawa Senators, the complete opposite, honestly, of the Detroit Red Wings. I really enjoy watching the Senators play. Make sure to check out our video we just did about the Ottawa Senators and their really the change of the culture here with DJ Smith in as the head coach of this team. A very good hire there by the Ottawa Senators, and it's really paying off for this team. They are 16, 20, and 5 on the season, so they're still 9 or 10 games below 500. They're definitely not in a great spot, but at least they're enjoyable to watch. They did not win a game this week, which really hurt them. They were actually on the climb the last couple of weeks. They really hurt their chances this week. They lost 4-3 in overtime. Jack Hughes got the overtime winner in that one, so I do have to admit I was kind of cheering for Jack Hughes when he was coming down on that breakaway. He needed that goal. And then they will play the Pittsburgh Penguins in that, they were the only game on that day, so that was kind of disappointing for the Senators. Pretty much getting national broadcast. They couldn't find a way to get done. A 5-2 loss in Pittsburgh. Then they will play the Florida Panthers, who have turned it on a little bit this week. A 6-3 loss there to the Florida Panthers. So the Ottawa Senators, Thomas Chabot, Eric Branstrom really starting to develop. And that's really what this year is for the Ottawa Senators. Enjoy the ride. Enjoy Kachuk, getting involved with, other teams and agitating them. And overall, this is a team that nobody really expected to be, in a playoff spot. And the expectations were so low for this team that they're actually playing above expectations. We would have expected them to be where Detroit is. They're actually playing, not super great hockey, but they're finding a way to put up points. They're making it enjoyable for the fans, and that's huge. All right, so at number 6, there's another team. Join the club maybe with Detroit, because the Buffalo Sabres at number 6 this week, 18, 16, and 8. They might need to get a couple of beverages. They won 1 of their 4 games this week. They lose 3-0 up in Boston to the Boston Bruins. They played the Boston Bruins. Why did they have them playing the Bruins for the new year? This is not the way Buffalo wants to start the year, playing their division opponent. I don't know if they'd consider it a rival up in Boston, but they would lose again playing the Bruins in the second of the back-to-back, 3-2 loss there. So they don't win that. Then they lose to the Carolina Hurricanes down in Raleigh, a 3-1 loss. Then they lose to the Tampa Bay Lightning 2-1. Again, this is a disappointing start to the season for the Buffalo Sabres. A little bit, of a weird situation. They just can't seem to find their footing right now. They did pick up a victory against the Oilers, who have been struggling a little bit. They did win that one in overtime, though. But Jack Eichel has been unreal for the Buffalo Sabres. Ralph Krueger is definitely starting to get the most out of his players. They made a trade, bringing in, changing things up a little bit. So I think that'll be good for this team as well. But you kind of wonder, what do you think is going to happen with this team, moving forward? Is this Buffalo team really a playoff team? They're not showing it. They've fallen back in the standings once again. Can Ralph Krueger get this team out of this rut and into a playoff spot this year? Because that's really, at the end of the day, that's really what's going to matter. And just a quick rumor, honestly, I'm just saying it, blue sky concept here, just kind of throwing it out there. Now, I know it's a divisional opponent, but the Pittsburgh Penguins have a goaltender named Matt Murray. Buffalo's goaltending hasn't been that great. Can we find a way to maybe make something work there? Just a thought. All right, so at number 5 in this week's power rankings in the Atlantic is the Montreal Canadiens. So the Canadiens drop in this week's power rankings. They are 18, 17, and 6. They were on the rise a little bit over the past couple of weeks, definitely showing some momentum moving forward, and then they don't win a game this week. Really disappointing week for the Montreal Canadiens. They lose to the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Florida Panthers, the Carolina Hurricanes. Definitely a disappointing situation for the Canadiens. A couple of divisional opponents minus Carolina, but you get the point. They lost to Tampa and Florida, 2 games against Tampa. Not going to help your cause when you're trying to cut the gap between themselves and a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning. They didn't do that this past week. Really a disappointing week for the Canadiens. They made a couple of changes. They made some trades, and I'll probably make a video about that, and I'll post that later on today. So make sure to stay tuned for that. They made a couple of trades yesterday, and we'll talk about that in a video. So, a couple of changes in defense, trading a couple of draft picks, bringing in some fringe players. Not a bad idea there by Bergevin at this point. All right, so at number 4 in the Atlantic this week, moving up a couple of spots thanks to the Sabres and the Canadiens' demise over the past couple of weeks. The Florida Panthers are 21, 14, and 5 on the season. They've won 3 of 4 games this week, so they are playing very well. They beat the Detroit Red Wings, the Montreal Canadiens. They did lose to the Columbus Blue Jackets in Columbus, but then they will play the Ottawa Senators and get a 6-3 victory there. So they won 3 of their 4 games, and those 3 games that they won were against their divisional opponents who are right in the same pack, trying to separate themselves from the pack. The Florida Panthers really made some leaps and bounds this week. They're back in a playoff spot. By the time I post this video, maybe not, but they are right there right now, and the Florida Panthers are really finding a way, to get victories all of a sudden. They're finding that goaltending, that goaltending is coming back. The goal scoring is there. They're really finding a way to get goals in the back of the net, and that's making a huge difference right now for the Panthers. All right, so at number 3 in the Atlantic this week is the Tampa Bay Lightning. So the Panthers and the Tampa Bay Lightning definitely building up that rivalry. These two teams are getting pretty close to each other in the standings. So the Tampa Bay Lightning are 22, 13, and 4 on the season. They won all 4 of their games this week, going undefeated, beating the Montreal Canadiens, the Detroit Red Wings, the Buffalo Sabres, and the Montreal Canadiens in that second game that they played them this week. So a good week. Again, keeping teams local for the holidays. I think that's good. That definitely benefited the Tampa Bay Lightning. They had a nice homestand. They've been playing well. And then continuing to start that road trip against Buffalo and Montreal up in the Northeast. They're playing well, even in the very brisk cold weather here in the Northeast. Tampa Bay Lightning are still getting things done. All right, so at number 2 in this week's power rankings in the Atlantic, continuing on the rise under Sheldon Keefe, is the Toronto Maple Leafs. So the Maple Leafs right now are 23, 14, and 5 on the season. They went 3-0-1 this week, so they picked up points in all 4 of their games. They did lose one of those games, though, unfortunately, but they did find a way to pick up points, and that's huge. And they lost the Rangers in overtime, being their one loss. They beat the New Jersey Devils 5-4 in a crazy game last weekend. The Devils wore those unbelievably great Christmas sweaters, great jersey, but unfortunately, leaving the building, New Jersey Devil fans weren't too happy. Damon Severson put the puck in his own net in overtime. Not a great look there for Severson, but let's keep an eye on that later on when we talk about the Devils, because Severson would avenge a demon there. They would play the They played the Devils, so they did lose. They did win that one in New Jersey. A little bit of a luck factor, but they found a way to win. Unfortunately, they lost to the Rangers coming back home. Alex Georgiev, the guy they have been clamoring for, won in Toronto in between the pipes. Lights him up. He played a very solid game. He did give up 4 goals nonetheless, but his team found a way to get the victory. A big win there for the Rangers, who have been hot very recently. Then they played the Minnesota Wild, a 4-1 victory there in Minnesota, and then the Toronto crowd moved its way to Winnipeg, and the Leafs Nation was there in swarms, and they beat the Winnipeg Jets 6-3 up in Manitoba. And then to take their top spot once again, this is becoming they pretty much dominated this division for most of the season, is the Boston Bruins. So the Bruins stay at number 1 in this week's power rankings. In the Atlantic, The Bruins are 24-7-11 on the season. They picked up 2 wins this week, and the other 2 games they were able to pick up overtime points or shootout points, so big points there. They have 11 extra overtime shootout loss points. That's going to add up at the end of the season. Pretty much 5.5 games worth of points right there in losses. So pretty solid there for the Boston Bruins. All right, so a quick recap of the Atlantic Division. At number 8 is the Detroit Red Wings. Number 7, the Ottawa Senators. Moving down at number 6 is the Buffalo Sabres. Also moving down at number 5 is the Montreal Canadiens. At number 4 is the Florida Panthers, who moved their way up a couple of spots. At number 3 is the Tampa Bay Lightning. At number 2 is the Toronto Maple Leafs. And staying at number 1 is the Boston Bruins. So with that, let's wrap things up. Take a look at the Metropolitan Division. All right, so to finish things up in this week's Power Rankings, I'm not used to doing this division so late. I usually do them first, but new year, we're changing things up. So take a look at the Metro for the first time in 2020. At number 8, some things don't change. The New Jersey Devils stay at number 8 in this week's Power Rankings in the Metro. They are 15, 19, and 6 on the season, so they're 10 games below 500. But shockingly enough, Ken Nazardine and the New Jersey Devils 3-0-1 to start the new year. They lost to the Toronto Maple Leafs 5-4 in overtime. Damon Severson putting the puck in his own net. What are you doing? He shot it right. You know, it was a perfect shot. It was 5-hole, just the wrong goal. Really great play there. Not. They would go up to Ottawa, 4-3 victory there in overtime. Jack Hughes getting the overtime winner. Really a great moment there for Hughes. He was so excited when he scored the goal. That was great to see there. They would beat the Boston Bruins 3-2 in a shootout. And Mackenzie Blackwood really looked great. And somebody would avenge their demon. Damon Severson turning Yaroslav Halak inside out and getting the winner there in the shootout. So great to see. He can put the puck in his own net, but he can score on the other team's goal as well. So that was a great way to wrap things up for Damon Severson, a very good defenseman there in New Jersey. That was really disappointing when that happened against the Leafs. But he turned it around, right? So there you go. Revenge your demons. That's how it works. The hockey gods are always there. So to end the week, though, the New Jersey Devils would head to take on the New York Islanders, one of the top teams right now in not only the Metropolitan Division, not only the Eastern Conference, but in the NHL. They find a way to beat the Islanders 2-1. Nico Hischier getting the game winner there. And they find a way to beat the Islanders and hold them off. So the Devils definitely took a step forward this week. Nazardine seems to be getting the system going here with the Devils, and they seem to be finding some success. Very exciting for the Devils right now. All right, so at number 7 in this week's Power Rankings in the Metro is the New York Rangers. So the Rangers are 19, 17, and 4 on the season. They played some pretty solid games. They beat the Carolina Hurricanes 5-3 at home. They beat the Toronto Maple Leafs 5-4 in overtime. They would continue they would start a Western Canadian road trip where they would play the Edmonton Oilers. They played pretty well in that game, but unfortunately, they came back down a couple of goals. But James Neal's hat trick was too much. A 7-5 victory there for the Edmonton Oilers, and then they would play the Calgary Flames and lose 4-3. Capo Kakos did score, which was a good sign there for the Rangers. Unfortunately, they did not get the result of a win in that one. Definitely a good sign of things to come. They could definitely move their way up, especially playing the way they have. They have to be careful also because the Devils starting to catch up, and we got to keep an eye on these teams right now at the bottom of the Metro. There really is no bottom of the Metro. It's a pretty solid division, and these teams are still keeping themselves right in the mix. All right, so at number 6 in the Metro this week is the Columbus Blue Jackets. So the Blue Jackets are 19, 14, and 8 on the season. They pick up 2 wins this week. They pick up points in all 4 of their games, so they did not lose in regulation this week. They lost to the Washington Capitals 2-1 in overtime. They lost to the Blackhawks 3-2 in a shootout. Obviously, we know the situation earlier. I believe it was Saturday or Sunday. John Tortorella absolutely went off. Bad call by the officials, not getting the time back on the clock. Zach Werenski would have scored that goal in overtime, and the game would have been over with a couple of seconds left. But They never added the time. The Blackhawks got the victory. Just didn't go the way of the Blue Jackets, and unfortunately that's been the feeling right now, I feel like, for the Blue Jackets since, luck didn't go their way in the playoffs. They weren't able to go on that deep playoff run, and they lost a couple of guys. They lost Panarin and Bobrovsky. They're continuing. They're continuing to rebuild, and it was disappointing for sure. It was disappointing, but it's a sign of things to come for the Blue Jackets. They really played well. As a good sign to end the week, they beat the Florida Panthers 4-1, and they beat the Boston Bruins 2-1 in overtime. So there's a sign. They play some good games. I think they're good for one kind of upset game each week. They've beaten the Penguins in upset games, the Maple Leafs, and most recently the Boston Bruins up in Boston. So very good there for the Columbus Blue Jackets. All right, so number 5 in this week's Power Rankings in the Metro is the Pittsburgh Penguins. So the Penguins are 23-11-5 on the season, and they won 3 of their games. They picked up points in all 4, so they did not lose in regulation this week. They would beat the Nashville Predators 5-2, and the first of a home-and-home. They would head home to take on the Predators again, win that one 6-4. They would play the Ottawa Senators, win that one 5-2, and then lose to San Jose Sharks in overtime 3-2. The Penguins have looked very solid with Tristan Jarry in goal. Even without Sidney Crosby, this team is continuing to find ways to win. Goaltending has been great. The goal scoring from throughout the lineup has been very solid. The Penguins find themselves in a pretty solid spot right now. All right, so number 4 in this week's Power Rankings in the Metro is the Carolina Hurricanes. So the Hurricanes moved down last week. Didn't find their way back up this week, unfortunately. But their record is pretty solid. They're 24-14-2 on the season. They won 2 of their 3 games this week. They lost to the New York Rangers to start off the week up in New York. They have had a curse on that garden. They have not found a way to beat the Rangers in MSG. Really been an issue for the Hurricanes. Hopefully they are able to avenge that soon. Not earlier this week, though. They would play the Washington Capitals and beat the Capitals 6-4, though, so a solid victory there for the Carolina Hurricanes. They would play the Montreal Canadiens to end off the week. Pretty short week here for the Hurricanes. Then they win that one 3-1 over the Montreal Canadiens. The goaltending has been a little bit of an issue for Carolina, but the goal scoring has been good enough. The defense has been solid as well, even with Jake Gardiner not playing as well as he would probably expect out of himself. But besides that, the Carolina Hurricanes have been very solid and very exciting to see what they do moving forward. But that division is so tight and so tough right now. They really need to find a way to stay motivated through the second half of this season. All right, so staying at number 3 in this week's Power Rankings in the Metro is the Philadelphia Flyers. So the Flyers actually moved down a spot in this week's Power Rankings in the Metro. They are 22-14-5 on the season, so they're 3 games above 500, not too bad. They did lose 3 of their 4 games this week, though, which is a little bit concerning. They lost to the Blackhawks. They did beat the Minnesota Wild up in Minneapolis, but then they would lose a couple of games. They would lose to the Los Angeles Kings 5-3 and the Vegas Golden Knights 5-4. I will give them credit, especially in that Vegas game last night. They were down and out in that game. They were down 5-1, 5-2. They actually made that a game late. Just weren't able to get that goal in that final couple minutes. They had a power play, a 5-on-3, and they just could not find a way to get that goal. And really disappointing, frustrating are all words to describe this first week of 2020 for the Flyers. They were really high. They were going on they were going for the fences, playing really well, and they are playing well. They just didn't get the results, unfortunately, this week. All right, so with that, moving up a spot, the Islanders at number 2 in this week's Power Rankings. So the New York Islanders are 25-12-3 on the season. They split their 4 games this week, winning 2, losing 2. They would lose to the Chicago Blackhawks. Robin Leonard got his revenge on the Islanders. I had a feeling that was going to happen. Total upset alert right there. Then they would play the Minnesota Wild. They would get a victory 3-1. They came out of the gate pretty slow in that game. They found a way to get 3 unanswered and beat the Minnesota Wild in that one. They would play the Washington Capitals on New Year's Eve down in Washington. They would pick up a 4-3 victory, a huge victory for the Islanders. Semyon Varlamov really shut the door late, and the Islanders were able to pick up a victory down in Washington. And then to end the week off, though, they couldn't find a way to get things done against the Devils last night at home. The Islanders were unable to win that one. They only scored 1 goal. They lost to the Devils thanks to a Nico Hischier goal early in the third period, and the Islanders would lose that one 2-1 to the New Jersey Devils. All right, so at number 1, once again this week in the Metro, is the Washington Capitals. So the Capitals are 28, 9, and 5 on the season, and they won only 1 of their 3 games this week. So an under 500 performance for the Caps. You don't see that very often. They beat the Blue Jackets 2-1 in overtime. They lost to the Carolina Hurricanes 6-4 down in Carolina, and they lost at home on New Year's Eve to the New York Islanders, a divisional rival, a team that's right neck and neck really with them in the standings. They lose that one 4-3 to the Islanders. So the Capitals find themselves in a decent spot right now. They're at the top of the division, so you can't complain. But definitely a little bit of a disappointing, last 2 weeks really from the Washington Capitals. But they really pulled ahead so early that they were really able to kind of give themselves room for a little bit of a cushion. But the way this division is, it's so congested toward the top. Those 5 or 6 teams, and now we're even talking about the Rangers and Devils. The last couple of weeks, they've been playing very well. Definitely to keep an eye on the Metro division that used to be known as one of the weaker divisions. Really, really turning things around over the past year or two. So taking a look at just a quick recap. At number 8 is the New Jersey Devils. Number 7, the New York Rangers. At number 6 is the Columbus Blue Jackets. At 5 is the Pittsburgh Penguins. At 4 is the Carolina Hurricanes. At 3 is the Philadelphia Flyers, moving down a spot. But moving up a spot, at number 2 is the New York Islanders. And staying at number 1 in the Metro once again is the nation's capital in the U.S., the Washington Capitals. All right, so that's it for this week's Power Rankings. We are 15 weeks into this Power Rankings. Thank you so much for watching these videos. It really helps out a lot. We're almost up to 120 subscribers. It's not even a year yet, and I'm already up to that number. So thank you all for watching. The channel has been growing tremendously over the past 2-3 months. So thank you so much for that. And hopefully now starting the new decade, hopefully we are here and continuing to move along through this decade. So thank you for joining us, continuing to join the ride here as we head into 2020. Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe down below. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.